Welcome to Open Source News. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Have a blessed day.
Welcome to Open Source News. I am your brother and your host, BCP. It is Friday. Welcome to the early edition. I'm just going to ask you right off the bat, if you like this video, and you know you are going to like this video, please just go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps us out. You have no idea. It forces the system to at least share this video to like-minded people who watch other conservative content. It really helps us out. And if you haven't yet joined our family, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. All right, folks, so we're here Friday. We are now well into the month of December, a third of the way through, and a lot of things are still up in the air. But, of course, this platform is acting like things have already been decided. We'll get into that some other time, but right now there is a lot of news and development that you need to know as we head into the weekend. So, without any further ado, let's get started with the first story.
It's been 199 days since George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis. Today, some reform. The city council there voted unanimously to take $8 million from the police department's budget and redirect it to be used in mental health and other social services. The overall budget for the police department is still $179 million. Floyd's death led to calls to dismantle the city's police department, but today the city council said it will not shrink the size of the force. The city's mayor, Democrat Jacob Fry, had threatened to veto the entire budget if officers were cut.
And because of that veto, as Bloomberg is reporting here, they made a compromise. They made a compromise budget, and the activists are calling this a big step. But you know what the biggest step up is or was? Think about this, folks. If you have a city and you're decrying the police that are in that city, even to the point where they were paying police officers to retire early, and you have a mantra of defund the police, and you have animus toward the police, and you have a, let's say, a soft spot for criminals and making them the victims, what is going to happen? What would be the result of this? It seems so obvious, and it was obvious to anyone paying attention, but for somehow these Marxist leftists over in Minneapolis were blindsided.
So after a month-long campaign to dismantle the police force sparked by this tweet from Minneapolis Council President, member Lisa Bender. Remember this back in June? She wrote, "Yes, we are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department and replace it with a transformative new model of public safety." So the council's now agreed to slash nearly $8 million from the police budget and focus instead on violence prevention as crime runs rampant through the city. Gunshot victims have doubled in Minneapolis this year. Carjackings are surging 331% since 2019, and homicides are up 73%.
That's right. If you talk about defunding the police, having a transformative police department, the big step that you're going to get is a step up in violent crime and crimes, because you're incentivizing the criminals to go ahead and do it because there will be no consequences for their actions. Victims of gunshots doubled, carjacking surged. That's 3 times the usual. Homicides up 73%. What they did is just advertise for criminals to commit crimes because there will be no law enforcement, and the law enforcement that was there, well, they were villainized. And of course, that incentivizes the criminals to do their criminal acts. Now, a casual person looking at this would say, well, that was just the consequences of misguided people looking for social justice. But folks, if you think that, you do not understand how the Marxists work. We disagree with them, we dislike them, we despise them, but they are calculating. This is all part of their plan, and this is not conspiratorial, this is not a theory. They themselves have written books about this. They have pontificated about this. Trained Marxists have talked about this. This is not a secret. This is not some sort of theory based on some kind of secret plan. Their plans have been made known and published. And that is to destabilize Western society. And what a great way to do it than having people living in fear under the threat of crime. And then what do you have to do? You have to have big government come in and save the day. Once again, the same institutions that caused the problem on purpose then prop themselves up as the saviors and the solvers of said problem. It's classic Marxism, and the people of Minneapolis are paying the price. What a shame. Talking about paying the price, budgets, and what have you, let's go on to our next story. Let's talk about the stimulus relief bill that we still haven't seen the legislators pass. You have to ask yourselves, what the heck are they doing? Why are we even paying them? They don't even do their job. Oh, but they have plenty of time to be on TV and virtual signal.
Overall, the bipartisan bill is a bit over $900 billion overall. Key components of that include about $160 billion for state and local governments to help support them in their budget gaps in fiscal 2020 and 2021 in particular.
There we go. Once again, another example of pure Marxism. Big money for big government. The same government that forced lockdowns and closed businesses and forced people into destitution the Democrats do not want to give a stimulus bill to the working man, who is, in this case, quite honestly, the victim of bad government. They want to give more money to governments who, by the way, consider themselves essential. So we are rewarding, through this bill, the legislators, our supposed representatives, are rewarding the same people that caused the problem. But there's not enough money to go to the people. Now, put aside your thoughts on whether you think the $1,200 stimulus check was a good or bad idea. You have to give credit to President Trump for doing something that is a populist idea. Instead of giving more money to bad government and big businesses, give the money to the people. That's one of the reasons why our economy didn't tank even worse during the lockdown period. But the politicians, the Democrats, don't care about that. They care about making sure that they have enough money for their local and state governments, especially the Democrat ones that were poorly run to begin with and continue to be poorly run.
In addition to that, there's about $180 billion for unemployment insurance benefits. So those two alone are over $300 billion. There's also about $288 billion in PPP and small business relief in there, which would allow businesses to take a second tranche of PPP funds if they got one, as well as allowing new applicants, because many folks did not get access to a PPP loan before the money had run out.
Do not be fooled thinking that this is a move by altruistic politicians that really care about small business. This is another form of crony capitalism, because they are passing this bill, yes, to help some small businesses. Don't get me wrong, that there's some small businesses have absolutely benefited from the PPE loans and the stimulus package. I'm not trying to say that that's not the case. But don't think this is all about helping the little man. This is another way politicians line their pockets and benefit their friends and families. This is a classic example of that. Let me remind you, for those that are not aware, that Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and her nephew is Gavin Newsom, the governor of my home state of California. And guess who directly benefited from all of this stimulus money and forgivable loans from the stimulus packages?
The ABC 7 News I-team revealed 9 companies, part of the Plumpjack Group founded by Governor Newsom, received millions in funding through the Paycheck Protection Program. The intent of the federal program was to keep small businesses afloat during the pandemic.
New data released by the SBA and analyzed by ABC 7 News indicates Plumpjack businesses, including wineries, bars, and restaurants, 8 of which are partially owned by Governor Newsom, received nearly $3 million in PPP loans.
I'd be more outraged if I were actually shocked by this news. But once again, the man who tells you you must wear a mask must be home by 10 p.m. and you should remove your mask in between bites is not only dining and having $15,000 wine bills indoors with no social distancing or masks with his friends and people in the medical community, while they're telling you that you can't do that, is the same man who his wineries and his restaurants and what have you didn't close. And on top of that, they got federal funding, forgivable loans from the federal government. Gavin Newsom is a crooked criminal, absolutely corrupt. And of course, nothing happens to him because he is buoyed up and supported by a whole other coven of crooks. Not just in California, folks. I assure you this is happening all over the nation with Democrats in high places and some rhinos as well. You just perhaps haven't heard about it quite yet.
About $80 billion in education funding as well for both K-12 and post-secondary schools to help adapt to any modifications they have to make in terms of their schooling. And so when you add all that up, it becomes very clear that you don't have the space to add in another $300 billion for individual payments. And so that would require something closer to a $1.5 trillion bill, which that's something closer to the size of what we might see proposed by Democrats next year, for sure, once the Biden administration comes in.
There's money for everyone when it comes to Democrats, but no money for you, who they forced into unemployment, destitution, and now, as I reported in the previous episode, people are going to start being evicted and foreclosed upon. There's no money for you. Oh, but since they're planning on, in this alternate reality of Joe Biden being the president-elect, they are planning on, when that happens, if it happens, they are then going to perhaps introduce the stimulus check then. Why? Because they do not want to give a win to the people that would be associated with Donald Trump. These Democrats and rhinos, these establishment DC swamp creatures, don't care about you. They care about power. Everything is a political ploy. Everything is a political tactic. Everything has political timing.
It is a smaller bill than we think is needed for our country, but in light of a completely changed dynamic, in less than 1,000 hours, Joe Biden will be inaugurated President of the United States. That change in dynamic enables our president to say this is a first step, but that much more needs to be done.
How much clearer did Nancy have to be than that? The new dynamic is, in their alternate reality, in their minds, in their plans and scheming, Joe Biden, in less than 1,000 hours, will be the president of the United States. And then they can roll out. She said it'll be a start, but then there'll be more coming down the pike. Absolutely incredible. But then again, what can we expect from Nancy Pelosi? Someone who is doubling down on their putting Eric Swalwell, who had a relationship with a Chinese spy, who fundraised and essentially helped him get into Congress. What do we expect from this swamp creature, Nancy Pelosi, who is absolutely fine with Eric Swalwell still being in that position that he has on the Intel Committee?
Well, I don't have any concern about Mr. Swalwell. There are those in the Congress who believe, and I am among them, that we should be seeing what influence the Chinese. I've been fighting them, as you know, for over 30 years in terms of their undue influence at universities in our country and the overtures they try to make to members of Congress.
Nancy Pelosi has been fighting China for the last 30 years. Look at her face. Even she doesn't believe that whopper of a lie she just tried to pass as truth.
In terms of Mr. Swalwell, in the spring of 2015, the leadership of the House and the committee were informed that overtures from a Chinese person were being made to members of Congress. When that was made known to the members of Congress, it was over. You know, that was the end of any communication with those people.
Another bold-faced lie from Nancy. Once we found out that was the end of the communication with those people, that's a bold-faced lie. Christina Fang still was able to have influence. She placed a spy in Eric's office in D.C. What do you mean that was the end of the communication? Once again, look, I pause it right here. Another tell. Another lie. Nancy Pelosi losing all her poker playing skills. And we're supposed to just believe, oh yeah, we found out in 2015. And you notice how she tried to water it down? Yeah, they were doing it to members of Congress. Yeah, of course, that's true. They were doing it to several people. Oh yeah, they were doing it to everybody. When we figured out we put a stop to that. If you put a stop to that, why was there a intern placed in Eric Swalwell's office by the same Chinese spy that we've been talking about in the news the last few days?
So it isn't, I think we should make sure that everybody knows what they are being subjected to. But I don't know that it means that we have to background checks for every intern who comes into the Capitol.
All right, now it's time to follow up on another developing story that we've been covering the last few days, and that is the investigation into the Biden family. And we have more details, especially about the fact that it's not just Hunter who's under the microscope, but when you have a crime family, there are multiple members of that family, and another member of that family being looked at is Joe Biden's brother.
New information about the federal investigations into Hunter Biden's taxes, but sources telling Fox the investigation is actually bigger in scope. A Senate committee report may lay out a blueprint. It describes the son of the president-elect, his business dealings with China, and what is being called in the report the potential for criminal activity.
This investigation, according to a source familiar, began in 2018. Fox News has learned not only are the feds digging into Hunter Biden's taxes, but he's also the target of a grand jury investigation. The federal investigation into Hunter Biden's tax affairs and business dealings was active in the final days of the presidential campaign, but it was covert to avoid influencing the outcome of the election. It's now in an overt phase. Fox has told his father, the president-elect, is not part of this probe.
Notice how quickly the FBI is to say, oh, no, nothing to see with Joe Biden. He's clear here. But in 2016, when it was President Trump and their attempt to frame him with the Russia hoax, no, it didn't matter that he was president-elect. They were gunning for him, both literally and figuratively. But with Joe Biden, there's nothing to see here. I mean, there was no shenanigans going on with Hunter and his connection to his dad. I mean, it's not like he was traveling with his dad to these places.
But a Republican member of the Homeland Security Committee notes Hunter traveled overseas when his father was vice president.
What did Joe Biden know, and when did he know it? He needs to answer questions.
A source familiar says the investigation was established on suspicious activity reports regarding foreign transactions. Hunter's business dealings with Chinese nationals, including some flagged for potential financial criminal activity, are outlined in a Senate committee report. The chairman of Senate Finance, one of the two committees digging into Biden business dealings, says their investigation was justified. The Senate report notes, quote, Hunter Biden had business associations with Ye Jianming, Gong Wendong, and other Chinese nationals linked to the communist government and the People's Liberation Army. Those associations resulted in millions of dollars in cash flow.
Now, of course, if you have been on this channel for any length of time in which this was a news story that I was covering, this is not news to you. But we have tens of thousands of new subscribers, and I don't know many of you what your, how recently you're coming into a lot of this information that a lot of us have known for a while. But Hunter Biden was getting kickbacks and was making money from the Chinese Communist Party. And his dad, who is supposedly the president-elect, and supposedly in less than 1,000 hours is supposed to be in the Oval Office, and we're supposed to just believe that there's nothing to see here. But let's talk about now the other member of this Biden crime family.
Hunter Biden is not the only member of the president-elect's family under scrutiny tonight. Some of the business dealings of Joe Biden's brother, James, also being examined.
There's more than one Biden caught up in a federal investigation. James, Biden's brother, whose name has come up in the course of an investigation into a hospital business he's linked to, according to a report in Politico. This is the same brother who allegedly introduced then former Vice President Biden to a business partner.
I was introduced to Joe Biden by Jim Biden and Hunter Biden.
Jim Biden didn't want to talk about any of that when approached recently by FoxNews.com.
Are you Mr. Jim Biden? I wanted to ask you about the China deal.
Would you please stop bothering me?
Biden has promised distance.
My son, my family will not be involved.
Look, Joe Biden has clearly said his family, his son won't be involved. Nothing to see here. Okay, that's fine. We can just go then. I mean, Joe Biden said his family's not going to be involved. We could just totally believe him. Can't we?
But yesterday, the taxpayer-funded transition team sent out a statement from Hunter Biden, who doesn't work for the transition.
That's right, folks. His family is not involved, yet, as Fox News actually pointed out, the taxpayer-funded transition team is the one that put out this statement. At buildbackbetter.gov, this was released. Statements by Hunter Biden and the Biden-Harris transition team. This is a statement that came out, like, I'm showing it to you. This is not exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. This is not a conspiracy from the right wing and the GOP conflating the two. You can see it right there. I learned yesterday for the first time that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware advised my legal counsel also yesterday that they are investigating my tax affairs. I take this matter very seriously, but I'm confident that a professional, objective review of these matters will demonstrate that I handled my affairs legally and appropriately, including with the benefit of professional tax advisors. Yeah, that's why you're under investigation, because everything's above board. Statement from the Biden-Harris transition. President-elect Biden is deeply proud of his son, who has fought through difficult challenges, including the vicious attacks of recent months, only to emerge stronger. What a weird statement to be making there. He has fought through difficult challenges. We all fought through difficult challenges. Hello, everything was shut down due to a unwanted export that came from the country in which Joe Biden's son has been making money. Oh, these vicious personal attacks. I have no words for this ridiculousness.
Now, Mike Davis, former chief counsel for nominations at Senate Judiciary, wonders, why is Joe Biden using federal government resources to issue public statements for his son, Hunter Biden, related to his personal legal problems? Is this legal?
This is Joe Biden we're talking about. It doesn't matter if it's legal. It doesn't matter if he's sitting there in Obama's Oval Office in 2016 scheming against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He is a Democrat. Nothing's going to happen to him. Or is it? Let's think about this. Joe Biden's son is now and his brother are now full-fledged on the news over their corruption and investigation. Things that have been already known to us, but totally hidden and totally not reported by the enemy media, the enemy of the people, the mainstream Marxist media. But now all of a sudden, literally the day after the safe harbor date, all of a sudden, this is news worthy of the mainstream media. What is going on here? There's got to be something more to this than meets the eye. Is it possible, and I'm just throwing this out there, is it possible that what I've been saying all along is true, and this is the latest move in the Trojan horse operation of getting Kamala Harris in the Oval Office? Think about it. With all of these things going on, plus the lack of mental acuity from Joe Biden, gives the Marxists two paths to knock Joe Biden aside and ascend Kamala into the presidency. Food for thought. Speaking of that lack of mental acuity, here is one of the latest foibles and gaffes by the gaffe master himself, Joe Biden, who can't even read a teleprompter anymore.
Ray, Joe Biden rushing ahead of the courts and ruling out individuals he hopes are going to populate his administration. These have become daily events now.
Yeah, very choreographed daily events, Laura. That is until Joe Biden takes the microphone. Here he is today naming retired Army General Lloyd Austin as Defense Secretary.
He was a statesman representing our country with a skill at tables that I've sat with him with foreign leaders, and I wondered whether or not he was from the State Department or from the Defense Department.
Biden seems to be wondering where he's sending Austin right now, but at least he'll be at the the tables, Laura. Laura, the Biden team, they're biting their nails to the nubs every time the man takes the microphone.
And this is the man that we're not supposed to question or worry about having his finger on the button. And this is the man supposedly that got 80 million votes, more votes than Obama and President Trump, who is the most popular sitting president in the history of America. And that is empirical. That is data driven. That's a data driven fact. Yet this man can't read a teleprompter, can't keep his thoughts together, and as I showed you the other day, didn't even remember the position that he was appointing Javier Becerra to, nor Becerra's last name. But don't worry about it. 80 million people voted for Joe Biden, and that's why he is the legitimate person at the office of the president-elect. Absolutely insane. Now, let me show you. I showed you a little bit of a clip previously, but I edited it out because I want to show it to you now.
Dr. Biden, can I just one thing on the news? The reaction to the news of the investigation of your son Hunter.
Let's go. Everybody.
So what you're seeing there is Griff Jenkins, a correspondent for Fox News, being shooed away, the press being shooed away by the handlers and the wranglers over there at the Biden-Harris transition team because they don't want questions of this type to be asked of Jill or anybody else. After all we've seen, they already published their official statement. This is absolutely crazy. They are not only censoring the news, they are kicking out the news people once again when they ask hard questions that should be asked. Is it really out of line for the press to ask the stepmother of Hunter Biden what her thoughts are on the allegations made against members of her family? You know that if the tables were turned, that they would be all over this. Actually, the tables were turned several years ago, and they went after Don Jr. and everything on trumped-up charges Pun intended, not intended. And of course, what came of that? Nothing. Nothing came of it because nothing was happening there. But here with Hunter, there are a lot of legitimate concerns. But you can't ask Jill. That's just she's protected. And that is out of line, according to the handlers over in the Biden camp.
So breaking just in the last hour, newly leaked audio posted by The Intercept. President-elect Joe Biden saying that Republicans used the defund police movement to, quote, beat the living hell out of Democrats.
Folks, we must pay attention to this. Again, I'm making the same point I made previously. Why all of a sudden everything coming out about Hunter and James Biden, and now we're getting leaked phone calls and comments, things to make Joe Biden look bad. Folks, I'm starting to suspect that I may be onto something. And we must track this. We must see if we start to see other disclosures, other leaks, other negative stories about Joe Biden that might force him to move aside for Harris. Just think about it. Nothing bad about Joe Biden. All of a sudden we have the Hunter story, we have the James story, and now we have this. Now this is not as huge and groundbreaking, but this definitely is being spun negatively about Joe Biden. Things that he said on the campaign trail that we're not supposed to hear or know about.
And it was a listening session on Tuesday, Bill, that this audio has now leaked out from, but the listening that Joe Biden was doing also came with a warning from Joe Biden for these prominent civil rights leaders that Republicans beat the hell out of Democrats at the ballot box when the talk turns to defunding the police.
They've already labeled us as being defund the police. Anything we put forward in terms of the organizational structure to change policing, which I promise you will occur. Promise you. Just think to yourself and give me advice whether we should do that before January 5th, because that's how they beat the living hell out of us across the country, saying that we're talking about defunding the police. We're not. We're talking about holding them accountable.
Why January 5th? Of course, like I've been telling you this entire episode, everything is calculated for political impact.
And January 5th is the day of the Georgia runoff, so Biden is obviously concerned about messaging Republicans talking about Democrats defunding the police and the impact that that could have on their chances there. I reached out to the transition team about this leaked audio and what they make of it. An official tells me this: President-elect Biden is the same person behind closed doors that he is in public.
I was going to make a joke about that he's the same person in public that he is behind closed doors. I was going to make a joke saying that that's ridiculous. And then I remembered all the things that were caught on camera with handsy-grabby Uncle Joey being very inappropriate with his fingers and digits, with females of all shapes, sizes, and ages. And then I was thinking, yeah, part of that is true. He is the same guy in public as he is behind closed doors.
As he made clear throughout the campaign, he believes in supporting bold and urgent reform to our criminal justice system while continuing to support law enforcement's mission to keep our communities safe.
With Facebook Shops, connecting people with your business just got easier.
You can bridge the gap between an online...
Once again, not a big deal, but a leaked audio that's meant to put Biden in a negative light. And let's break this down as a final thought for this episode. Joe Biden is making the point here that the defund the police, that whole mantra, that whole idea, didn't serve the Democrats well, that the Republicans were able to use that and gain seats and be very successful in taking away legislative power from the Democrats. Yet somehow he escaped all of that and got more votes than anyone in history. Let me repeat this. Joe Biden in this leaked audio recording is saying our defund the police idea was used by the Republicans to beat us nationwide. It wasn't very popular, but somehow that didn't apply to me, and people voted for me, even though that was an unpopular Democratic idea from the Democratic Party, and I represent on the top of the ticket the Democratic Party in 2020. If there's a disconnect there, that's because there's a disconnect there. Is it possible? Is it just possible that what we've been told about the win of Joe is inaccurate? I'll let you decide. Thanks for being here, my fellow patriots. Please receive a big hug from all of us here at Open Source News. We are a family operation, and you are our family as well. So please receive a big hug. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. That is how we adopt you officially into our family. If you want to support our work, you can just go over to bcpextras.com.